All right, hello everyone. It's Robert Evans, and we're about to start show number 3 of the stories behind the image. So this is an ongoing series that I've been doing during our social distancing. Everyone's inside watching content, and I wanted to create something that was kind of easy and mindless to watch. So I went through and I picked some of my favorite images from the past 25 plus years as a professional photographer. And I want to share some of those stories of those images. I think sometimes it's fun to hear what happened behind them, how are they created, or even the little anecdotal stories that go with them. So this is episode and show number 3, the stories behind the images. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is my show, The Pixel Show, something I wanted to do just to sort of inspire, encourage, and educate. If you've never watched before, I am a Sony Artisan of Imagery. I have been a professional photographer for about 30 years now. And these are some of the other shows on our channel, so if you haven't been here, go back and watch some of the other content. We just recently shot a dog sled race, senior portrait session. I took my Sony RX107 to a Sharks game when I was out there working, and the image quality was pretty impressive. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So let's start. The very first image was taken at a wedding. I started shooting weddings in 1989, and I've been doing them a long time, and I've seen a lot of things. And one of the things that I've developed my own love over the career is when I'm at a wedding, I love to focus on grandparents, because I know if you're lucky enough to have your grandparent at your wedding, chances are they might not be around too much longer after that. And I've seen that and heard those stories from my couples over the years. And so I really make an extra effort to catch a candid, beyond just a traditional portrait of the bride and groom, or with their grandparents. So this image, I was in the room getting ready in the morning. This is the mother of the bride kissing her father. I just love the moment. And I love telling stories. So I've photographed weddings, like I said, for a long time. And I really, beyond everything, try to tell a story. And it's an image like this that sometimes you see on the wedding day and you miss it. But these are moments that I really strive to capture along with everything else. This particular image was a beautiful wedding that I did in New York. It was on Ellis Island. And as you know, Ellis Island is where all the immigrants kind of passed through when they came to the United States a long time ago. If you've never heard of Ellis Island, look it up. It's a big history lesson in itself. And so this particular image, the planner went through the trouble and the design. I mean, I always thought it's perfectly executed, of making sure, if you notice, this was a Jewish wedding, so the huppah that's in the background, the chairs, everything was clear so that it did not obstruct the view of Lower Manhattan. And I'll go back there for you. And so I wanted to make sure that when the couple walked down the aisle, like I'm shooting the wedding, and while I'm shooting the vows and all those things, I'm thinking I need to get an epic shot of this couple walking down the aisle, and I need to show Lower Manhattan as well. So I switched over. I believe, again, this was an A6000 at the time, and I wanted to make sure that I could shoot 11, 12 frames a second. And at the time, there was no A9. There were no cameras that shot faster than that. It was the 6000 that I went to and was my go-to for, and I would shoot it for sports. So I thought to myself, when in the wedding day do we actually need 10 frames a second? And we don't, really, except for maybe when a couple's walking down the aisle, and especially when the ceremony's outside. I learned over the years that this is a great time to shoot that fast, because instead of getting 1 or 2 or 3 usable images, you can have more than one of the couple coming down the aisle. So I made sure that I framed them to the right, and to the left I put Lower Manhattan. So I put on a wide lens. I believe this was a 16 to 35, and I wanted to make sure that I included that in the background. So that's how this image came about. Thinking ahead a little bit, which is really while I was shooting the ceremony, I was again thinking, how could I make this shot amazing, and I wanted to capture that. So I figured it might be my one and only time that I ever get to do a wedding here, and I'm going to come away with an image that I'm proud of. This image, this is a really fun image. This image was taken at Oshkosh at the air show, and my son is a big aviation fan, and of course I like shooting sports and any reason to get your camera out and take pictures. So we go camp at Oshkosh every couple of years and spend 2, 3, 4 days camping out and taking pictures of air shows. And so this particular image is a picture of a stunt pilot. His name is Bill. I forget his last name. It says it right there on the plane. And the interesting thing about this plane is that it's a bunch of different colors. So depending on what light it's in, how it turns, it could be pink, it could be blue, it could be purple, it could be orange. It's really like one of those interesting paint jobs. Let's see it bigger again. And he's actually flying upside down. And no, I wasn't in an airplane next to him. This is shot from the ground with an A9 and with a 100 to 400, I believe, lens right when it first came out. And I really just, the clarity and the quality is amazing, that you can see his hair hanging down in the bubble in the cockpit. You can see his reflection on the wing of the airplane against the blue sky. And, you know, with the A9 being able to shoot 20 frames a second, shooting aviation and fast moving planes. And this is, in the grand scheme of things, this is a slow moving plane, considering I'm shooting F-22 Raptors and other fast planes like that fly by, the Blue Angels. But just a unique shot. And I love it because it looks like that I possibly was, you know, flying next to him in another airplane. All right, this image, this was shot here in Minnesota. And if I were to title this image, I would call it Modern Innocence. This is at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum here in Chanhassen. And this was an exhibit that they did 2 summers ago. And these, technically, the exhibit was called Birdhouses. And each artist got to do their interpretation of a birdhouse. And so I was, for the Arboretum, I do some work for them. I shoot their annual report. And I was out covering the birdhouses, and this little girl runs through the shot with her red dress. And it's just such a nice contrast between the green of her and the red dress, and her running, and her, you know, hands up, and her little pink on the bottom of her shoes. So sometimes you get lucky. I kind of feel this was a very lucky shot, and to be at one place at one time to get something like this. So that's what that is. This image, probably, you know, this girl, her name was Catherine. This wedding was at the Four Seasons in Santa Barbara. This is many years ago too. And the story behind this image was she actually had me do a little boudoir session of her in the room ahead of time. And so it was me, her, the videographer, and a couple of her friends. And she was completely naked, and I was taking pictures of her and trying to, you know, cover her up and make it so that it was, you know, doable. But she was a very spunky, fun bride. And so when she finished, she got up off the bed, and this other dress was hanging. This wasn't her wedding dress. This was her mother's wedding dress that she altered. And this was her second dress. So she wore this at the cocktail hour. And I had already photographed the dress, you know, the dresses hanging on the window. And I said, excuse me, I said, Catherine, hold the dress in front of you, because I needed to cover her up. And so she's holding the dress, and her girlfriends are making her laugh. And I captured this great moment. One of my favorite candids, I think, in getting ready photos I've ever taken. And it was just such a great moment, and it's just real. And I think I like the authenticness of this image. This image is a destination wedding that I did, many years ago. This is in Acapulco. This is actually when it was actually safe to go to Acapulco, because I think over the years it's gotten not so safe to go down there. But this image was taken on the beach, right where the ceremony location was going to be. And I don't know what that thing was, but I will tell you, when I got to that location and I saw that structure that they created right there on the beach, my first thought, of course, is probably most of you, is like, oh my gosh, that thing is so cool, and I am going to take some cool pictures with that. So we did a lot of different images around here, but I just sort of love the feel of this. I love the structure, and it was a very fun wedding to do. Another kind of a fun story that goes along with this image. This groom was involved in Google, and I think helping to start Google Europe or something like that, if I remember correctly. And the night of the rehearsal dinner, we were at the president of Mexico's home. He had this beautiful home. This guy had rented it out. And we were, it was the night of rehearsal dinner. Of course, it was hot. And that day earlier on the same property, he had like a beach day for everyone. And so there was a beautiful ocean front. He had jet skis and a massage table and ices and anything his guests wanted to do. And myself and my other photographer, Josh, were shooting that. So we'd been in the hot sun all day and shooting all this stuff and having a good time. And that night we're at the rehearsal dinner at the same, and they sat down to eat. And so photographers, like if you shoot events, when people sit down to eat, it's your chance to get a little bit of a break. And so we sit down and we go find this quiet area, and kind of near where we were, there was this other bar that looked like it was set up for later. And Josh and I are like laying back on these couches and benches that were cushy, and just with our eyes closed going, oh my gosh, this has been such a long day. And all of a sudden we hear, hey, you two. And we look up and we're like, oh my gosh, it's like the groom. He's all, come here. And we're like, oh my gosh, we're in so much trouble. Like we're just trying to take a break and relax. And he's all, come over here. And so we walk over to this makeshift bar. And it was basically about 50 different types of tequila. And it was a tequila bar. And he basically made us drink shots with him, try 5 different types of tequila. And prior to that, like I was never a big fan of tequila. And, I probably only had Cuervo Gold before. And he introduced us to all sorts of other sipping tequilas, and we got to drink tequila. And it was just a really cool moment. So that's one of my good memories that comes along from this wedding. This image, you will hear me talk about this in these shows. One of the things that I have done and that I do and I continue to do is I have not photographed my bride or a bride walking down the aisle from the front of the church, temple location for at least 15 years. Now, I know you're like, what? That sounds a little bit shocking. But I get it done. I have my second photographer do it. But what I do is I hang out in the back with the bride, and I plant myself next to her for about 30 minutes before she walks down the aisle. And I just shoot candids and the moments that lead up to her walking down the aisle. So in this particular case, we were at a church in Santa Monica, and she had pulled up in the limousine out front, and she was sitting there waiting for her turn to walk down the aisle, and these were her sisters. And so as she rolled down the window, I was, right there kind of waiting by the car, waiting for her to get out, and I just love the moment. Her eyes say it all, her beautiful smile says it all, and the sisters sort of looking in the window. Again, when you capture a shot like this, when, we get lucky to get something like this, I was so excited. I mean, this one photograph, made my whole day, made my whole wedding, and still continues to be one of my favorite images pre-wedding ceremony, especially a girl sitting in a limo. This image, this is cute, right? You gotta love this. So I did a wedding in Hawaii. again, probably 10 years or so ago. The day after the wedding, the groom took myself and about 15 or 20 of his guests. We went out to go on a sailboat ride and I guess whale watching, which obviously you see we found. And we did come across these whales like right at dusk. And I just love this image because it's so unique and it's so representation of like, mom and baby together. Now, I don't know if it was a mom or baby, but that's how I see the image, is the mom and the baby, and both with their tails out of the water. I was super excited. I think it was probably one of the first times I'd ever seen whales out in the ocean. And to capture this type of image and remind me of that wedding, it was just something fun and unique. Okay, this is a first look image for those of you that shoot weddings. Now I have a rule about first look, and I don't enforce it, but I talk to my brides and I say, when you see each other for the first time, I suggest that you do it alone and by yourselves. And the reason for that is because what you see here. Now, the great thing is if people are around, you do get expressions like that. But oftentimes what happens when there's a group of girls is they see each other for the first time and you hear this like, oh, and all this noise. And I think it's a little bit intrusive in their moment. I think it's bad enough that there's usually a photographer, 2 photographers, a videographer. So it's not quite so private. But yes, as artists and photographers, we want to capture this moment. Well, so it was the same thing. This was her bridesmaid that was helping her. And I said, it's fine, you can stay. I'm not the ogre, I'm going to kick her out. I said, just sit back there, you can watch. I said, just watch and be quiet. And so the couple saw each other for the first time and they did the first look. And then after they'd kissed and I'd shot a few pictures, the groom suggested that they practice their first dance. So as they did that, I thought to myself like, oh, I wonder what my bridesmaid's doing behind me. And I turned around and that was what I saw. Her reaction, thinking that, oh, it's so cute. And then you see their reflection in the window. So really a great image. Love this picture. This is an engagement shoot. Well, it's actually not an engagement shoot. This is a 1-year anniversary portrait. And this was a girl, Annalisa, that used to work with me for a little while, and she became a photographer herself, and she's very good, and she's a mom and has 2 beautiful boys, and her husband Trent. And but we were doing their 1-year anniversary portrait in downtown LA, so it was like an engagement shoot. And I went to this spot in downtown that I loved, and I liked the side of this building. And the envision of like using the side of the building, and I thought, oh, great, we could I can slow my shutter speed down, and I can get some cars passing by. Now, those of you that live in Los Angeles or have been to Los Angeles, even in downtown LA, we don't have a lot of taxi cabs like they do in New York. I mean, it's easy to get a taxi cab picture in New York. So I just sort of thought like, well, I'll get some cars in it. My camera was on a tripod. I was about a 15th of a second, and I was shooting images of cars going by. And I got a few, of course, because there were cars going by, but it was nothing that I was really happy with. And you heard me talk about earlier in this show, or maybe in another show, where I talk about intent. So now I had intent to do this shot. I had a vision in what I wanted. And in the very last image, I get this. So it is a blue taxi cab with a yellow top. And what I like most about it is that the blue sort of matches the blue of the building. It matches kind of the blue in her skirt. But then you have that yellow as a nice little contrast to break up. And then the movement and the position of the car where I caught it is just perfect, in my opinion, right? They have their dog. But this is probably one of my top engagement pictures that I'm proud of. It's not, like I said, it's not an engagement shoot. It's a 1-year anniversary portrait, but still probably one of my tops. This image I took of a bride. And the only thing I can say about this image is I've never, ever been able to duplicate this. This was a wedding that I did at the Bel Air Hotel. She had beautiful flowers, beautiful earrings. This girl was a model. And I was really just shooting detail. And as a photographer, you know, the detail is just as important as the family and the faces. But I caught it just so, and I just love this image. And it reminds me of the wedding. There were so many great stories around this, but still one of my favorite, not a ton of story behind it, but I like to share this because I've really tried to duplicate this image at other weddings and I just can't seem to get that done. All right, this image was a wedding that I shot in Bermuda, and what I love about this image, of course, are all the colors. Again, the power is simple. You watch my show Power is Simple episodes that I do. You have middle ground, foreground, background, rule of thirds. And here's my rule again where I have them in the direct sun. So as I stated in another show, I think in show 2, my rule, if you're gonna shoot a couple in the direct sun, you want to make sure that they're not looking at the camera. So in this case, I had them kiss and look at each other. But the other thing that I did to make this shot work for me, and one of the reasons that I did this shot, or really the only reason that I did this shot, because I had never prior to this seen green growing on the beach like that. So to have this beautiful green ivy, I don't know if it was ivy, but whatever it was, like growing on the beach. So I made sure that I got down low so that I could see plenty of the green and change my angle. Also, I wanted to minimize the ocean and just kind of show the ocean and the blue sky. So that was this image. This is probably one of my favorite quote unquote destination wedding images. And I've used this in ads and to promote destination wedding stuff. But you know, just sometimes like changing your angle, changing your perspective gives you a whole new shot, because I was standing up and then I dropped down to my knees to take this shot, and this was the magic image. Here's another image. Storytelling, of course, I like to tell stories. Years ago, I was the photo expert for weddingchannel.com, which ultimately then not absorbed. And this particular image was a wedding that I had done for Wedding Channel. They used to throw these like dream weddings for people and they'd win, and then I'd go shoot them. So this was shot in New York. But I was trying to find a position, you know, to be obscure and out of the way. And a lot of times, you know, I'm shooting this part of the ceremony with a 70-200 lens, which is what this was. And I kind of found myself behind a tree because they were like filming this for television and all this stuff. And I had to kind of be a little more careful than I used to, than I normally am, right? But so I found a spot where I could kind of hide behind a pillar. And again, I think this is a little bit of luck. You know, I got a little bit lucky, but the groom went to put the ring on the finger of the bride, and then this little ring bearer sort of peeked around the corner, and so I made sure that I put him in the background. And it really helps tell a story. Like, these are the little things, and especially with depth of field. Depth of field is really a great tool, if you will, to help tell stories, because you can focus on one thing in the image and include another that goes out of focus, but it helps sort of complete the picture and tell that story. So it's definitely something that you can think about when you're taking images. This image, in the very first show, I showed you an image, if you go back to show 1, of a couple jumping on a trampoline, and I talked about where I learned one of my first very important lessons in life. And this image is no different. I like shock value in my work, especially when it comes to weddings, but I don't push it. I only do it when it comes naturally to me. And this is at a place in Southern California in Malibu called the Adamson House. And they have this really beautiful outdoor fireplace. And one day I was doing a wedding here, and I'd seen it, I'd shot there before, and I was like, that'd be cool if I could get the couple to stand inside the fireplace and then their heads would be hidden and you just see the bottom of them. But of course, it's a great thought. But I thought there's no way in heck that anyone's going to agree to this. It's a fireplace and a white dress. And so anyway, like I went over and I inspected it and I got in there and I was like, wow, it's like super clean in here. Like they haven't burned wood or anything in here for years. There's no soot, there's no nothing. And I was like, so I'm going to ask. And so I asked my couple to do it and they did it. So it's just kind of a unique, fun image. And I always like try to capture stuff like that when I can. And this just worked out in my favor. So yeah, like I always say, listen to that little voice inside you. And when you get those ideas that come to you on the wedding day, obviously make sure it's safe or whatever. But if you don't ask, you're never going to get the shot. And finally, thank you for those of you that have stuck around for these shows. This is the last image, number 15. I'm doing about 15 images a show. I shot this about 3-4 years ago. This is in Ireland. And a big shout out to my friend Eddie Hennessy, who lives in Ireland and was a gracious host to me when I was there. Quick story about Eddie. He was asking me questions online. I was getting ready to go do this wedding 2 or 3 months, and I didn't even know where he lived. And I was planning to go to Ireland after this wedding that I shot in London. And so it turned out he lived in Ireland. And so we flew into Ireland, and he met us at the airport and put us up in his little town and paid for the hotel that night. It was so amazing. And then he showed us around. We were in Southern, so we flew into, we toured Dingle and some of the other little places in Southern. But this image, thank you, Eddie. But this image, I was actually with another Sony artisan and friend of mine, Jeff Berlin. Jeff went with me to London to shoot this wedding, and then we took off and we went to Ireland. And long story, we were following Google Maps. We were following Google Maps to, I think we were going to the Cliffs of Moher. And this is the road that it took us on. It took us on this little tiny one-way, and we were like starting down this road, this beautiful view. There were no cars there, and Jeff and I stopped to get out, of course, and take some photos. And we were taking photos, and as we were taking the photos, all of a sudden this other car, peaks the crest and comes down. And I thought immediately, like I snapped the photo because I liked the composition and where the car was. But my first thought right then and there was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Because we were already like a half a mile in, and there's like no way on this road that 2 cars could ever pass each other. I mean, I don't even know how they even allow it to be a 2-way road. So anyway, we get back in our cars and we start driving until we kind of meet the other car. And I figured, well, the person in the other car is going to know what to do. It's going to be a local. And here we are on this little one-way road, like I thought back to Dr. Seuss, like Sneetches on Beaches, where it's just sort of a standoff and they're staring at each other. I get out of the car because Jeff was driving, and I walk over to the other car and I'm like, well, what do you do? And I expected it to be, and the girl looked at me and she laughed. She's like, I have no idea. It was another basically tourist who had never been down that road either, and Google took her on that drive as well. And so here we are, like staring at each other, not knowing what to do. So anyway, she's like, well, back there was a little wider spot. So she backs up, we go forward, we get to this spot in the road. I get out of the car and I guide them. And I kid you not, we were like this far apart, like just, inches as one car passed. The thing on the side of the road, there was like these ditches. So if you went off, you were going to get stuck. So that is my absolute memory from this photo. But Ireland, of course, is absolutely beautiful. And you see things like this. Everything's green, these little roads. It was everything that I wanted and expected it to be. And I would love to go back and spend a little more time there. But that's it. Thank you for making it to the end of this show. This is show number 3 of the Stories Behind the Image. I'm Robert Evans. I'm your host of The Pixel Show. Please subscribe and like if you have not. Go back and watch some of our videos. Follow us on Instagram at The Pixel Show and other places. Thank you again, and have a great day.